Hello, welcome to the series of videos where we will cover probably the most extensive and complex part of the TBM application. It will be about vendor management. It's a very wide topic and it will include a lot of different subtopics or subjects. So I have decided to split this tutorial into set of shorter videos, so it will be easier to navigate and check exactly that topic which you wish to get information about. We will be talking about basic things like vendor management, vendor list, vendor profiles, like that, so settings which affect on the vendor management process. And then we will move to actually working with translation assignments, selecting candidates in assignments, or selecting vendors who will be working on assignment. But we will then talk about generating purchase orders, attaching files, sending files, working with vendor portal, communicating with managers, about notifications coming to managers and vendors when any of parts executes some action in the application. Then we will talk about unit conversion, partial assignments, about invoicing, about payments, about vendor time management, about test pieces. So a lot of topics to cover, and this one will be introductory one. And here we will talk about vendor list, vendor profiles. So let's begin. First of all, let's probably start with general global application settings which affect on the vendor management process. Probably there are not so many settings here, but probably under Files and Folders tab you can find a base folder for files created under your translation assignments and vendors, and also translation assignment folder name template and nested folders which are created automatically in all folders created for your individual assignments. Also, next up where you can find corresponding settings is assignment settings. Here you can select default payment type for vendors, which will be used for all new vendors which you will be creating in the system, default purchase order template, purchase order number format. It supports this field, has some default value, and it supports a number of variables which you can use to generate purchase order number and file name as you like. Then notifications group contains two options: automatically send notifications about new assignments and notify other candidates about assigned work. It's about candidates in translation assignments when you have multiple candidates and one of those candidates accepts the work, and if that work is immediately assigned to that candidate, other candidates who still didn't provide any answer, they will get notification that work has been assigned and it is not available for them anymore. Then recommendation options: disable machine learning for recommendations and disable recommendations based on previous work. You can disable these types of recommendations because especially machine learning, it can consume computer resources. So machine learning mechanism could be pretty demanding for computer resources, and you can speed up workflow by disabling this functionality and making recommendation list generating faster. And short setting: reset assignment numbering each year. It's clear that since 1st of January, numeration in assignments will be reset to 1. Under vendor portal, just two options: allow self-registration for vendors. It allows to enable or disable possibility for visitors of your vendor portal to self-register there, and allow vendors edit only empty fields. This option affects on vendor profile page If it is enabled, then vendors will be able to add information only to empty fields. Other fields won't be enabled for editing. It affects on default fields and on tables as well. Under productivity settings, we have one option, turn on workload planner for assignments. This option allows to enable or disable time slots automatic generation according to default vendor productivity settings in your translation assignments. We will talk about that in one of next videos. Alright, and now let's actually move to vendor list and vendor profiles. You can open vendor list by using navigation menu, reference data, scroll down, vendors, or we have quick access button here on the toolbar, vendors, Alt 8, keyboard shortcut. You can click there and you will see vendor list. Here it's default list. All lists in TBM are identical, so you have columns, you have pageable selector here at the bottom, filter and row. You can customize this view by using list view customization option, etc. So here in the list you can search your vendors, view them, create new vendors, and there is a toolbar at the top which provides some helper functions for you to simplify vendor management process. And probably let's go through these commands on the toolbar. The first one is the change type. There are three types of vendors in TBM, and these types are predefined, you cannot change it. Freelancer, staff, and organization. If freelancer and organization types are clear what they mean, then staff is a bit different, because staff type means that that person actually is employed by your company. And vendors with staff type can be also selected not only in translation assignments as people who actually do work on assignments, but also these persons can be selected as responsible persons in quotes and projects and jobs, so they can be used as project managers in different documents in the application. Next button is archive. Archive button allows to select multiple vendors in the list and send them to archive. Archived vendors won't be displayed in the vendor selection lists or combo boxes, so they will be filtered out from any selectors in the application. Test pieces button, it opens just a list of all tests existing in the application which you can provide to your vendors. We will talk about that later in next videos. Batch create users. This is about vendor portal. To allow any of vendors listed here to use your vendor portal, you have to create login for them, or user, application user. And these users are listed here under security users page. And by default, when you go to users and create a new one, you can select a vendor linked with that user. It could be pretty long process and pretty boring, so you can select necessary vendors in the list and click batch create users, and you will see dialog which allows you to quickly create vendor portal users from this list. Again, we will talk about that when we will be talking about vendor portal. Next option here is search vendors. This button opens such a panel on the right, and it allows you to quickly filter and find vendors by using different criteria. This list provides a set of different options which you can use to search your vendors, and these options include native language, language pairs, services provided, specializations, average rating, archive status, type of vendor, employment status, country and city. And you can make selections, combine them. For example, like that, we want to search for vendors whose native language is English or French and who support one of these language pairs according to their profiles. To hide this panel, you can click again on the Search Vendors button or use this close button here, like that. Then Excel Export Import button, it allows to export and import selected vendors to Excel file. It's default button which exists in all list views in TBM, as well as Next button, Find References and Replace. Next button, Create a message to vendors. It allows to quickly create some email and send to selected vendors. For example, you can select few records here in the list, click this button, select message template which you want to use to compose your message, and then mail message dialog will be opened, and under recipients you will find three selected vendors, so you can quickly compose some messages and send some information to them. RWS button, it's about integration with RWS products. It includes Group Share, Trados Studio and Trados Live. It's about functionality of synchronization with Group Share, Studio and Trados Live projects. As you know, probably you can not only create projects or assignments in TBM, but also assign corresponding users in linked Group Share projects, Language Cloud and Trados Studio. So to achieve that, you have to establish links between TBM vendors and RWS product users. So this link, when this link is established, then you can use that vendors to assign them to remote projects. And print button, it has drop-down button nearby. It allows to select some vendors in the list and send them to report which is linked with vendor entity type. By default in the application we have only one report linked with vendor type. It is price list. This default report allows to print price list of selected vendor or vendors. In this case I have selected only Alex and I've got report containing 3 pages like this, but I can also select multiple vendors here and I will get a report for each of price list report for each of selected vendors. You can go to list of reports and create more reports linked with vendor entity type, and when you create such report it will automatically appear in this list. And last button is help button, which opens wiki article describing vendor list. Okay, that's about vendor list, and now let's open some vendor profile and check information which we can fill and use in vendor detail form. It contains a lot of tabs here and indeed a lot of fields. The first tab is main data, where you can upload vendor photo and provide some basic information like vendor type, first name, last name, title, company name, VAT number, date added, etc. Contacts information, address, web pages, some internal notes. One of the most important fields here is employment status. There is candidate, on approval, employed and declined, and only employed vendors with employed status will be displayed in all vendor selections list in your assignments and quotes and whatever. Other statuses like candidate, on approval and declined can be used when you view vendor list, and you can quickly filter by employment status here, for example, and do some actions to approve or decline vendor. Probably it could be some testing or whatever. Okay, Next tab here in the vendor profile is settings, important tab. It contains a number of settings and which can be set for each vendor. Let's start with default currency. This field allows to select some default currency which will be automatically used in all assignments which you create for that vendor. When you leave it empty, then global default currency will be used, or currency of translation job based on which translation assignment is created. Default unit allows to select default unit in newly created tasks in translation assignments. Method of determining invoice due date allows and date number. These two options allows you to configure how to determine deadline for invoices automatically for invoices created by that vendor or for that vendor. Minimal charge allows to select some amount in base currency, and if amount of translation assignment is lower than this value, then application will show you corresponding warning. Then 3 default taxes allow you to select default values used in invoices created for that vendor. Default purchase order template allows you to override default purchase order template selected on the global level in the application. So when application automatically generates purchase order for this vendor, it will be automatically used. Application will automatically use this value, and if this value is empty, then global default purchase order template will be used. Then default analysis import settings. It's about input and analysis report. Again, it can be global one or this individual one. Language code. This one allows you to select code of language which will be used to format dates, numbers, so all values in documents generated for that vendor. So mainly I think it will be purchase orders. Time zone. You can select non-default time zone and application will automatically convert time zone in assignments from your time zone to vendor's time zone. Also, time zone will affect on vendor planning tool. So for example, if vendor start workday start time is set to 9 o'clock, but it's in some very different time zone from you, then in the report showing vendor availability, this workday start time will be automatically converted to your time zone, selected in application settings here. Do not offer tests. It's about testing functionality. When vendors use vendor portal, you may create default tests offered to vendors, and this option allows to fully disable any offers of tests to vendors when they log into the portal. Productivity settings allows you to select or specify daily productivity for each day, default productivity in average words, and also it will affect on recommendations and estimation of vendor productivity during specified period of time, and it could affect on vendor selection process. All right, start time and end time. Difference between these times allows application to calculate average productivity per, for example, 1 minute or 1 hour. It also affects in reports and vendor selection process. Then this option, willingness to work, it allows to select a value from 0, which means not specified, and then on the scale from 1 to 10. And this value corresponds to some estimation of how vendor wishes to work with you, and the higher value here, then application in certain circumstances may recommend that vendor in some translation assignment. And archive status, I already mentioned that vendor can be archived and not offered in translation assignments anymore, and archive reason allows you to specify some description text why vendor was archived. Okay, next up, files. It's pretty simple. It allows you to create a folder on the hard drive for a vendor and then upload some vendor specific files. It could be, I don't know, contracts, NDAs, like that. Languages, it contains two tables. The first table is native languages, which allows to specify native language of vendor, and language list is list of language pairs where vendor can work. And fluency is a free text allowing you to specify level of knowledge of this language pair. Then services provided allows to specify services provided by a vendor and source language and target language for each. And if we open some service and try to hover mouse pointer over source language or target language, you can see that it can be left empty if the service does not depend on source language, and the same on a target language. For example, DTP could depend only on target language, but translation usually depends on source and target language. And of course, these values will be taken into account when generating vendor recommendation list. Under specializations, the same list of specializations supported by language, and you can see that approved and tests approved columns here, they will be populated automatically when vendor passes some test in this specialization. Price list tab, it's about prices and rates calculation. Here you can link one of existing price lists or create a new price list for a vendor, like this. Probably we can open it to demonstrate it how price list looks like. So in the price list you specify different rates for different services, fuzzy types, language pairs, units, domains, currencies, etc. And this table under price lists allows you to attach to a vendor any number of price lists. Some of them can be default, some of them can be optional, and only default ones will be used in translation assignments by default, and while optional can be used only explicitly when you explicitly select specific price list in your translation assignment. Here, payment type field allows you to select one of methods how application will calculate amounts paid to your vendors in assignments created for them. Default value is based on price lists. So you select this value, then add necessary price lists here, and application will use these price lists to calculate amounts due to for vendors. And there are two other values here. The first one is based on logged work time. In this case, all price lists will be ignored, and instead you have to specify hourly rate here, and this rate will be applied to logged work time recorded in each individual translation assignment task. And another value here as a percentage from source job amount. You specify some percentage, for example 30 or 70, and when you create some translation assignment for a vendor based on some translation job which you have to do for your client, and that job of course will already contain some pricing information, and application will just take that source job amount and multiply it by this percentage value, and thus will calculate amount paid to your vendors. Resultant price list is just kind of like report. It takes this default price list, recalculates all the prices to your to different fuzzy types, and it generates a list with prices for all fuzzies based on some base price specified in your default price list. Test pieces, it allows to assign and view tests processed or assigned to a specific vendor. Payment methods, it's just a list of payment methods, and these payment methods will be available for selection in invoices created for this vendor. Milestones is for like internal notes where you can record some events occurred during your communication with that vendor. And auto unit conversion settings, it allows you to specify automatic rules when source job units should be automatically converted into some target unit supported by a vendor. For example, if you do not want to charge vendors or to calculate tasks to a vendor in words, and these words should always be converted to pages, then you can create such a rule here, and application will always and automatically do such conversion. Days of unavailability, it allows to record days when vendor is not available, and this will be taken into account when estimating volumes which vendor can process by specified date. Software allows you to specify a list of software supported by a vendor and compare it with required software which can be specified in your projects. Assignments tab just shows you a list of translation assignments which already have been created for this vendor. And Audit Trail tab allows to track all the changes in the vendor profile occurred during all the time when this profile exists. Additionally, at the top of this page, you can find one additional button, Upload CV File. This button is available both on Manager view and Vendor Portal view. And this button just allows to quickly upload CV to the Files tab. And if, for example, other CV file is already exists here, it will be automatically replaced by another file which you uploaded. And under file type, CV value will be automatically selected when you upload such file. For example, like this one file uploaded, I click OK, and you can see that on this day we uploaded file type CV with such a name, and we can download it and view at any time. So that's it about vendor profiles, about vendor list, and see you in the next part where we will start talking about translation assignments and vendor groups.